This is Voices for Climate, the podcast where activists, scientists, innovators, and everyday people speak out for the planet. If you're looking for honest conversations, bold ideas, and real climate solutions, you're in the right place. My name is Arnav, and today we're joined by John Carrese. John is the former director of the San Francisco Bay Center of Excellence for Labor Market Research, hosted at Cabrillo College, where he served in that position for 20 years. John has also worked at several nonprofit organizations focused on worker retraining and support, and has served as a consultant to colleges and nonprofits on strategic planning, grant writing, training programs, and more. John is now retired and stays active as a volunteer with the Bay Area chapter of the Sierra Club, working on implementing climate literacy programs for students in schools in San Francisco and throughout the Bay Area. John, it's great to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Arnav. It's my pleasure. Yeah, it's great you're doing this.
Yeah, so to start off, can you maybe tell us what drew you to climate activism and specifically climate literacy?
Sure. Well, I think I grew up in a family in upstate New York. My mom was, a kid who grew up on a farm, and I grew up in a relatively rural area. So I always cared and was introduced to the concept of, the importance of the environment and Mother Nature and protecting the environment, and always kind of that simple principle of always leaving things the same or even better than you found them in terms of your environment. So that's kind of like in my early years as a kid. And then I think I really became engaged in probably, in the early 2000s as I was working at community colleges, and the whole issue of climate change. Maybe the very first thing I can remember is Al Gore's movie An Inconvenient Truth really kind of opened my eyes to the issue of the climate crisis and the science behind it. And so then in the community college world, and in my job specifically within community colleges doing labor market and workforce research, I we started studying the green economy and jobs that were related to addressing the climate crisis and climate change. And so I did a whole series of reports from like, the early, maybe 2005, 6, 7, we started all the way really up to, when I retired last year, we were still doing them, reports on the green economy and the incredible potential for students to get trained to move into those kinds of jobs, and the importance of that kind of work to addressing the climate crisis. So it was really through my work that I got engaged in it, learned a lot about it. And then a little later on, maybe even just 2 or 3 years ago, I found out about the Sierra Club. The Bay Area chapter had a specific work group or committee focused on climate literacy in schools. I just read about it in their newsletter, and I joined that committee. And ever since then, I've been active in trying to specifically focused on San Francisco because I've worked in San Francisco schools and colleges to try to promote getting the school district. But this is happening across the Bay Area, so other people are working in other school
Mm,
districts.
yeah.
But trying to get school boards and leadership in school districts to mandate, really, to make it a priority that all students be taught about climate literacy, they become climate literate by being taught about the climate crisis and what to do about it. So that was really through my volunteer work with the Sierra Club that I became active in that. And we're still doing that through a group called um, San Francisco Climate Literacy Advocates.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing work. And is there any specific reason why you kind of came into climate literacy? Because, the Sierra Club definitely has sort of other branches of work related to climate change that they do.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'm an educator, that's my career, and I really
Mhm.
feel like there are many, this is such a huge problem. And there are many, it's like an all of the above strategy is needed. And one important strategy is education. And it's disturbing to me, actually, that many people in our country still think of the climate crisis as a hoax, or that it's really not real. We're not, climate change isn't real, which is just, mind-boggling to me. So I feel like education plays a real critical role. The best, time I think to be educated is in elementary school, middle school, high school and there is great curriculum now that many organizations have working with the Sierra Club about how do you do climate education in a developmental way. So what do you teach to first graders versus eighth graders versus seniors in high school about the climate crisis? And so I feel like, it should be mandated. Just like we mandate, English and math, social studies and science. It's a perfect curriculum to integrate into science, actually, right? The climate crisis, because it's really important. And I think youth understand that it's important to teach in schools because their future depends on it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I definitely agree with the sentiment that, climate literacy is super important and not a lot of people understand about it. And so, kind of when it comes to climate education, what would you define as success when it comes to, informing people about climate change?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, success is if every student in every school in California and in all other states, so every student in the country has as a good education around what is climate, what is the climate science behind the climate crisis, right? They understand the science of it, they understand it's real. And then once they understand that, they have they learn some tools and strategies about how they can take action and how they can address it as an individual, but even more importantly, in a group or an organization, because that's when you get real change happening, and it's much more powerful to do it with other groups in a group with groups of people in other bigger organizations. And there's a lot of work going on across the country and lots of great organizations that are doing that. So that would be my kind of dream, that every student gets that kind of education in school and at least prepared to know what they could do if they want to work on addressing the climate crisis and taking action.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's also something I really hope we can eventually achieve in the future where, all the youth are educated about the impacts of climate change. So could you maybe kind of delve into some of the work that you do specifically in the Bay Area, any successes that you think are worth mentioning when it comes to climate literacy?
Oh, well, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm lost track, maybe six or seven school districts that have adopted a resolution at the school board level, right? So
Mm,
their school board said we're passing a resolution that says every student in our school district, in all grades, elementary school, secondary school, all students will get a climate education and become climate literate, just in the way we were talking about it. And not only the science behind it, but how to take action. And so Oakland has done that. I think Oakland Unified School District was the first, but Berkeley has done it. Piedmont has done it, school district. Fremont has done it. Hayward, I believe. Um, I want to say Livermore. There are six or seven. I'm not remembering all of them right now in the Bay Area. And very importantly, Los Angeles Unified School District. And LA is the largest school district in the state and maybe one of the, right up there with New York City, is one of the largest in the country. So the fact that all LA students in a massive school district are going to become climate literate in their school through their school district is important. So the Bay Area is continuing to do this work, through the Sierra Club and more. We're working on San Francisco right now, and more. We hope more school districts will be added to that list soon.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, especially with Los Angeles, such a huge school district making that commitment to teaching their students. But throughout this journey, I'm sure there must have been some barriers, in terms of getting these resolutions passed. And so what would you say are kind of the biggest barriers that are there right now in expanding access to education?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, we're hitting a lot. We're hitting a number of barriers in San Francisco. San Francisco's school board has not adopted that resolution yet. So I'll just use San Francisco as an example of some of the roadblocks you hit and what you have to keep kind of working hard at to overcome. So their school board is in a lot of financial distress right now. they're kind of having a lot of money problems, right? And balancing their budget and having enough funding for just the basics. So they actually passed their new policy is that they won't pass any new resolutions that they can't fund. So they won't pass a climate resolution, climate literacy resolution, they've told us, because if they were to pass it, they have no money to implement it. So that's a big roadblock because we can't do it at the top school board level. So we're trying to do it at kind of a more bottom-up approach from individual teachers, and where that's our group, San Francisco Climate Literacy Advocates. We're working with teachers and parents and students and a couple of administrators in the school district that are showing leadership on this to try and form a coalition that will put more pressure on the school board to do this. But in the meantime, until that happens, do it in individual high schools. Like Lincoln High School has a Green Academy, and the teacher there is very involved with us and is helping us to get, more, we're working on writing grants and getting more funding so that we can expand the work at her school and maybe even other schools. We're also partnering with a group called the U.S. United States Green Building Council, US GBC. The Green Building Council is an association of, they're mostly architects, engineers, and people in the construction fields that are, committed to building green and sustainable buildings. And they're also committed, they have a whole, we're working closely with their education programs director to try and see what resources they can bring into San Francisco schools to help us expand more programs in more schools to teach climate literacy. So that's just a few examples, but money is a real problem. When you don't have funding to do this kind of thing in a school district,
Mhm.
it's a real barrier. And then leadership. You need people on a school board and administrators um, that see this as important for their students and are committed to it and want to show leadership and make it happen. So when you have a school board that says we're not going to pass that resolution and we're not passing any new resolutions about anything because we have no money to implement it, that's a real problem. So that's a barrier, and we're working on it as best we can.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think the bottom-up approach is definitely something that I hope, ends up working out. I want to go back to something you previously said, about how you're teaching students at all grade levels, and there's some people, who still continue to believe that, oh, climate change is a hoax. And so when it comes to kind of teaching students, how do you approach teaching about climate change in maybe the communities that are politically or culturally divided?
No, that's a great question. I thought about that because given me some questions that you might ask, and I thought, if I were to say one thing that I would say we could do that would make a big difference is get students outside in nature,
Mm, yeah.
um, and really think about how do you introduce students to um, their world, right? They're out in the environment, in the forest, in the parks, out just in the world, outside of a building, right? Outside of their home,
Mhm.
and begin to understand what's around them, and even think about, like, the animals and the plants and everything that is in danger, really, because of the
Mhm.
climate crisis. And if you can get students out in nature on a regular basis, and it could be like, hiking or overnight camping or whatever. There are so many beautiful parks in the Bay Area, in California, national parks, state parks, East Bay regional parks. My son works in East Bay regional parks, and there's throughout the East Bay. There's tremendous opportunities to just be out
Yeah.
and hike and be in nature. So anyway, my point is to be in nature. The more we can get young people in nature, outside, and appreciating, how beautiful it is. I think
Yeah.
um, if you kind of, the things that you care about, love or care about, that helps you once you are in that space where you go, wow, this is beautiful. I want to take care of this and protect this. Then that next step kind of leads to, to action. Like, how do I do that? How do I make sure that, this forest I'm hiking in or this park I'm in stays this way? And that we even have more, that we expand to have more open space and more parks. So anyway, I think getting in nature and experiencing nature is a really good first step.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the way you characterize that. I think that is something we should, try to promote. And so, in the schools that have currently implemented these, climate literacy measures, do you think these schools are doing enough, or is there anything you might want to change about how climate is being taught in these classrooms? Whether it is something like, maybe having more field trips to these natural areas, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think
something
that
that
that's a
seems
yeah,
interesting?
more they could be doing more with that because I think curriculum is good in the school, but then
Mhm,
more getting outside. One way to do that even on a school grounds is garden programs. So I think more garden programs where students can get outside and see how their food that they go to the store and buy is actually grown, and begin to kind of like nurture plants along, and then even eat what they've grown, I think is a great experience and an important thing more schools can do. So school garden programs, you need funding for that. You need people that can teach that. But yeah, I think back to what I was saying with San Francisco, schools could be doing more by, um, making the commitment to teach climate literacy throughout all their schools. Board
mhm,
resolutions are a good strategy to do that. But also, you need the leadership, and leadership can come from not just the administration and the principals and the school board, but from teachers. Teachers, can kind of like band together to step up and be leaders. Students can as well. There's a lot of great student work going on across our schools. In Fremont School District, the whole climate literacy board resolution was led by a student group of students. They started it and they pushed it up to the board level. So students, parents, teachers, and community members all can be working together to do this.
mhm. Yeah, that's amazing to hear, especially that the Fremont
Yeah.
initiative was student led. I think that's really amazing. And so, for students that might not be in those school districts that have committed to teaching about climate education, how do you think those students can go about becoming more climate literate?
Yeah, I thought about that. A couple of examples are, my daughter lives in LA and she's very active in something called the Sunrise Movement.
Mhm.
I don't know, have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the Sunrise Movement is a youth-led movement of young people just that care about the climate and want to do something about it and address the climate crisis. And there are hubs, they call them, or chapters
Hmm.
all across the country. She's in the LA chapter. I think there's a Bay Area chapter, but there are hubs all over the country of young people that are working and taking action to address the climate crisis and to promote um, legislation, and taking other initiatives, organizing to kind of push um, state leaders and national leaders in Congress and the House and in the Senate, U.S. Senate, to pass more legislation and take more action to address the climate crisis. They were very much behind the Green New Deal that, parts of it did get implemented in the Biden administration, not the biggest, not as big as they wanted in the original conception of the Green New Deal, but many things that you saw in the let's see, Inflation Reduction Act, which is actually much more than that. I mean, it was all about. There was a whole part of that. It was $370 billion to address the climate crisis, and that was a piece of the Green New Deal. So the Sunrise Movement is a youth-led movement I would encourage people to get involved in. I mentioned our group, SF Climate Literacy Advocates. So if you're in San Francisco, I'd invite people to join us. But also in schools, usually, and I don't know at Monte Vista in Cupertino, is there a green club or some kind of a environmental club?
Yeah, like our school district, for instance, has a climate collective that
Okay,
I'm part of. Yeah.
great. Yeah, I would say look and see if your school has a green club or a climate collective or a environmental club. And some schools also have, like Lincoln High School in San Francisco, they actually have academies. The Green Academy is focused on teaching about climate, sustainability, and environmental issues. So those are some ways I think that if you don't currently are, if you're not in a school currently that has a comprehensive climate literacy program, those are some things that you could maybe think about checking out or finding out more about.
Yeah, that's great advice. I wanted to now pivot maybe kind of towards your career and some things you mentioned about green jobs, for instance.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned you started doing that work since the early 2000s. Could you maybe first off kind of explain what is a green job and what are some examples people might not typically think of?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll give you kind of a classic definition of a green job. It's a job that contributes to preserving or restoring the environment and addressing climate change. So any job that does that is really a green job. So it includes things that are in like renewable energy, like a solar installer or a wind turbine technician, right? um, Geothermal technicians, anything that has to do with renewable energy, anything that has to do with conservation, right? Restoration and conservation of rivers and land, uh, conservation work, and that gets into things like field biology and scientific, uh, conservation. Sustainable agriculture is an area that all kinds of work is going on in, and so if you're, you could there's a job called agricultural technician or sustainable agricultural technician, and that would be working on a sustainable farm, organic farm, and kind of producing food in a sustainable way and knowing how to do that, right? Sustainable farming. So green jobs basically focus on sustainability, and reducing environmental impact and getting us closer to a clean energy economy, right? Where we're off of fossil fuels completely and we're just doing everything, to run our economy with clean energy. So how we heat our buildings, our homes, how we run our cars, and transportation, and do everything, everything. How, you think about packaging and plastics, how we manufacture things and how we package things. We're using so many unsustainable things like plastics that we've got to stop, using. You can make compostable, plastic, not plastic, compostable forks and knives for picnics and compostable plates and compostable packaging. Everything can be done now. We have all of the technology we need now to solve this. We just need the political will and the leadership to do it. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of what a green job is.
Hmm.
One
Yeah.
thing about it, like something you might not think of, like you asked me that, like, well, what's a job you might not think of? So if you think about accounting, like you might want to be, you might think you want to be an accountant going to business, and the question comes up, it's kind of a philosophical question. Is there something called a green? Could you be a green accountant? And I would say yes. So if you want to be an accountant, but you want to go to work for a company like a solar company or a wind company or any of those companies that I was just talking about in environmental protection or in green construction, or making transportation and manufacturing greener, you could be an accountant in that kind of a company, right? So I guess you'd be
Interesting.
called a green accountant. I mean, I think we have to expand our thinking about what it means, what a green job means, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so, kind of tying back to then climate literacy and sort of education in schools, does the curriculum incorporate topics about green jobs? And if not, would you say there's ways that schools can maybe better prepare students for jobs in the green economy?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that if you're in something like a green academy, it probably does to talk about green jobs and what are, opportunities, to work in the green economy. Um, but if you don't have that in your school, probably, I mean, we don't really teach, it depends on how your school addresses uh, college and career readiness, right?
Mm,
So, I mean, I think that's an important part of of every student's education, especially once you get into high school, like career education. And
Mm,
so I think schools should be doing a lot more. And there are high schools throughout California. I know that there are high school programs that are called career technical education programs where you can get into a career pathway. And some of the schools do have green career pathways in some of the areas I was talking about. But I think many, many more schools need to do that. And so all students should be college and career ready and have that option to go to a 4-year college or go to into a kind of maybe a 2-year college, like a community college I went to, where there's many, many kinds of programs like what we're
mhm,
talking about, kind of career technical education programs. And many of our Bay Area community colleges have green, kind of green career pathways. But there's a lot more work to be done, I think, to get more high schools teaching these kinds of about these kinds of green careers.
mm. I see. Yeah. And so, my last question for you then is what advice would you give to a young person that's maybe interested in pursuing a climate focused or sustainability related career?
Yeah, I mean, talk to people in your school, your teachers, find out if there's opportunities, for career technical education or a green pathway of some kind, a green academy. Um, if not, talk to your parents and your friends of your parents. And I think one of the greatest strategies that I've always used and encourage young people that I know to use is find through your social network somebody who does a job that's in the green economy, and then just ask them for like what we would call I would call an informational interview, like invite them out for a cup of coffee or do a Zoom chat with them like we're chatting and
Mm,
ask them about their job. Just ask them, that's what, you kind of did this with me. It's like, what was your job and what did you do? And just kind of begin to get curious and find people that are doing green careers or green jobs and talk to them. Find out about what they do, how they got their education to do it, and just keep doing as much of that as you can. Reading is a great, there's so much online, reading books, searching the internet for green jobs. Just Google green jobs, and go for it. You'll
mm,
get, you'll have an avalanche of information about green
mm.
jobs and green careers if you just Google that. So reading and talking to people. And then I'll come back to the thing that I said that I think really is a great strategy schools should be doing more of, but young people can just do it themselves, is get out in nature, go enjoy a hike, go to the parks, go camping, get out in nature. And when you're out there, there's park rangers and there's people that work in the parks and, work in these different places and talk to them about what they do
Yeah.
and how they got into their job. So those are a few ideas.
Yeah. No, that's amazing advice, and I think such a powerful note to end on. So, John, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience and insights.
You're welcome. Good luck, Arnav, with everything, and I'm glad you're doing this.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the show and share it with someone else who cares about building a more sustainable future.